Hello, and welcome to using IPR to aid in instructional planning. An IPR is an instructional planning report. This is one of the most helpful and exciting reports that College Board releases about your students' performance on the AP exam. The IPR provides detailed feedback about how your students performed on a variety of questions and skills that are tested on the AP exam. This will allow us to look for relative strengths and help us find weaknesses that our program might have. An instructional planning report has 2 pages. The first page provides you with a general breakdown where you can see how many of your students received a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and compare this to the percentage of students that took the exam. You can also see how your students performed on the multiple choice and the free response relative to other students who took the same exam. The second page of your IPR provides a detailed breakdown of how your students performed on a variety of skills tested in the multiple choice and how they performed on each question of the free response. Some of the key things that we'll be looking at in this session is the global and group mean for your students on each of these topics. The global mean is the number of questions that the average student got right in the national sample, and the group mean is the average number of questions that your students got correct. For AP exams that have recently been redesigned, you will receive a much greater breakdown of topics that your students have performed on. For example, in this calculus IPR, we are given a breakdown of how our students performed on a variety of the big ideas that were tested, how they performed on the impacts, and how they performed on a large number of skills that are tested on the AP exam. Your IPR is a very useful document, but to be able to effectively use it, we need to understand what it can and cannot do. Your IPR cannot provide you information about how individual students performed on the exam. It will also not tell you exact questions that students missed. What your IPR can do is help you identify skill gaps that your students might have, and it will help us look for relative strengths and weaknesses in our student data. When used correctly, we can also use an IPR to monitor improvement from year to year and help determine if adjustments that we are making to our course and sequence are helping improve student performance. Today we will be discussing 3 ways to analyze our IPR. The first will be a comparison to the national average in order to figure out areas of strength and weakness in our program. The second will be looking to see if we have any clusters in our data which might indicate places that our students are struggling. The third will be how to use multi-year trends to determine if adjustments you are making to your curriculum are leading to increases in student performance. Before we begin, a quick caution about using the national average. Since most teachers' student population is not identical to the population of all students who took the AP exam, simply comparing whether or not your students are at, above, or below the national average is generally not as helpful as comparing their relative strength to the national average. We will be looking at how your students performed in each area compared to the national average to identify relative strengths and weaknesses in your students' performance. The easiest way to analyze your student data is by downloading your IPR in an Excel format. To do this, please log on to the AP College Board website and open up your IPR. Once you have done this, up in the top right corner, there should be an icon that says Print Download Options. If you click on the arrow next to the HTML logo, you will get a window that allows you to select View in Excel 2007 format. When you click this button, your computer will download an Excel file that has your IPR in it. Please open your IPR in Excel. When you open your IPR, you will get a general overview of how your students performed, including the percentage of your students that scored a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, as well as the percent of students globally that received these scores. You will also receive a breakdown of how many of your students fell into each quartile on both the multiple choice and the free response. But we will primarily be looking at the second page of your IPR. You can find the tab for this page at the bottom left of the spreadsheet. The second page of your IPR provides much more detailed information. on how your students did on a variety of multiple choice and free response topics. We are primarily interested in the ratio of the global mean to the group mean. We will have Excel calculate this ratio. To do this, we will first select the column to the right of group mean, right-click, and insert a new column. Clicking on the first cell of multiple choice data, we will type in equals, click on the cell for group mean, type in divides, and then click on the cell for global mean and hit enter. In order to get a more precise ratio, we will click on the increase decimal button under the number selection. You can then either copy and paste this calculation into each cell, or click on the box at the bottom and drag down to carry this calculation further down the spreadsheet. Today, what we will be looking at is the ratio for the number of multiple choice questions these students earned compared to the global mean. We can see that this teacher's students performed about 14% higher on multiple choice. But if we look at their performance on probability and simulation, they performed about 20% above the global mean, while only performing about 5% above the global mean on sampling and experimentation. This indicates that on multiple choice, this teacher's students do significantly better on probability and simulation as opposed to sampling and experimentation. We can do a similar analysis for free response. This teacher's students perform about 19% above the national average on free response. On sampling and experimentation, they far exceeded that ratio, performing 31% higher than the national average. But on statistical inference, they only performed 9% higher than the national average. This gives us an indication about where these students did very well on the multiple choice and the free response, as opposed to places where they could improve their performance. The second thing we will be looking at on IPRs is clusters. Clusters allow us to identify places where we can grow student performance. For example, in this first free response IPR data, we see that there are 48% of students in the first quartile and no students in the second quartile. This indicates that a large majority of students struggled to earn very many points on the free response at all. And if we can increase student performance even a little bit on the free response section, we might be able to drastically increase student performance on the AP exam. The second selection shows that the students have a cluster in the third quartile. This demonstrates that a large number of students adequately understand the material presented, but they're having a very difficult time reaching the highest standard. We might need to look for places that we can use enrichment to help push student understanding of concepts in these areas. We can also use clusters when analyzing individual content standards. For example, from this IPR and statistics that we are using before, under sampling and experimentation, where students had the lowest ratio for group to global mean, we can see that there is a cluster because no students were able to reach the third quartile. This indicates that students either easily mastered these concepts or struggled to have an adequate understanding. This teacher should probably try to determine what was preventing students from reaching the third quartile. The final piece of analysis that we will use in instructional planning reports is looking for multi-year trends. These both represent a trend for different teachers on performance standards in calculus. The first teacher was striving to increase their performance on differential calculus on the AP exam. While it can be difficult to know if student performance has increased from year to year because the global mean changes, we can use the ratio of the group to global mean to determine how much increase we have seen. For example, we can see that the ratio for this teacher's students increased every year, indicating that changes the teacher made to instruction quite likely influenced student performance on the AP exam. In terms of a free response question, modeling numeric and analytical data, we can see that another teacher was able to significantly increase the ratio of student performance to the global mean over a multi-year period. By analyzing your IPR on a regular basis, we can determine whether or not student performance is increasing due to changes that we have made in our instruction. Please bring your IPR to your NIMSY training this summer. You will be using it to do further analysis to determine areas that you can work on for the coming year. Thank you.